Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to another episode of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show.
You usually when I
Today's episode is, as always, a great one. As I said, it's me, your boy, Josh McKinney, fresh off of a loss at the Fuji World Pro. I thought I would mention that I did not win at the Fuji World Pro as I had hoped I would. We talked about the lead up to it a few times on the podcast, and so I didn't want to leave you guys hanging that are not on my email list. If you guys want to get more information on how the match went and what mistakes I thought I made, things I could do better, be sure to sign up for my email list. You can sign up at simplifyingjujitsu.com, and I will send you, all you have to do is click on the free ebook, Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu, and I will send you my free ebook where we go over the essential positions of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the 5 essential positions that 90% of Jiu-Jitsu take place in, and how to train them. Also, of course, there are some fun stories and reasons that I wrote that ebook. There's also an audio version of the ebook that you can check out too. But either way, it will sign you up, get you on the email list, and you will just get more information on what we're doing at simplifyingjujitsu.com and on the podcast and on everything. It's just a fun way to be able to communicate. It's a much easier way to be able to communicate because you don't have to record an entire episode or something like that. That being said, special thanks to producer Logan Wayne for producing this episode. In more ways than one, he actually lined up this guest and edited the audio for me. I had people tell me that the audio on the Eric Hebner, if you listen to that episode, the last episode that we did, that the audio was subpar. The audio was like a blue belt, and an only self-defense blue belt that only does no-gi and does Japanese jiu-jitsu. Not good sound quality. Logan was actually one of the people that told me that, and he offered his wisdom when it comes to sound editing. So if you guys notice a difference, be sure to send Logan Wayne a message and tell him thank you for saving your ears. And also, just another note on that episode, I got more feedback on that episode than any episode that we have ever done. I would say by far. It was amazing how many people commented on that episode, how many people loved the mindset of Eric. It's cool because my next guest, who I will get to in just a second, has a similar mindset, has a really cool mindset, and I think you guys are going to like that. But the interesting thing was all the feedback I got. So just know, if you guys ever want to give me any feedback on the podcast, whether it is positive that you love the guest or whether it is that you think that the sound is bad or something like that, I read those things. I respond to them. Whether it's that you hate the way I say jiu-jitsu, I have a speech impediment. I'm working on it. Okay, I'm trying my best. But I actually had somebody, this is a side note, this is funny, somebody at a tournament last week, at the tournament that I fought on, he said, "Hey man, I have a question." I go, yeah, what's up? And started it out, he gave me a compliment sandwich. He started it out with a compliment. "Oh, I love the show, I love your email list and everything." And then he said, "Why do you say jiu-jitsu like that?" And I go, "Dude, I have a speech impediment. I try to say it. I try to say it. I try to say jiu-jitsu. But sometimes when I'm talking fast, it just comes out jiu-jitsu. I don't know why. It just does." And he laughed and he's like, I really thought that it was some type of, this is the proper way to say it type thing. He's like, I thought that you had some reason behind it. So that was kind of funny that happened to me. That was just a side note, random side note. But back onto the main point, my next guest is Sam Rivera. Like I said, Logan Wayne produced this episode in more ways than one. He not only edited the sound, he actually lined up Sam. Sam is I will say a filmmaker, right? But he is a lot more than that. you may be unfamiliar with his name, but familiar with some of his work, because a lot of his work really spreads very widely in the jiu-jitsu community, because he makes these mini documentaries on a lot of jiu-jitsu guys. And some of them, and it was funny, even talking to him off camera, or off recording, we were still on camera, but not recording, he had some really cool things where we were talking about who he's gotten to work with, and I got to hear some of those fun stories too, that you guys will get to hear too on the episode. But without further ado, let's get on to overcoming and my new friend, Sam Rivera. You guys are going to love this one. Here it is. All right, we're rolling. Sam, how are you doing, man?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on, man. I'm excited. I guess our mutual friend, Logan Wayne, who's been on the podcast, is one of my brown belts, introduced me to your YouTube channel. I want to say before he introduced me to you, he said, hey, you've got to check this out. He really posts some cool motivational type stuff, and just the production level is, I think as he put it, insane. And then so I checked it out, really loved it, and worked out with you when to get you on the show. So I'm happy that you're on, man. I'm really happy that you're here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So I just wanted to start out, because I didn't know this. I couldn't really find this in research or anything like that. So I just thought it'd be a really simple place to start. But what got you into jiu-jitsu?
What got me into jiu-jitsu really was because I wanted to, well, let me back up a little bit. I started off doing Muay Thai. And as a kid, I always wanted to be involved with martial arts. So at the time that I started, which was like 9-10 years ago, there weren't really many jiu-jitsu schools around like there are now. So I remember I was on a highway and I was driving past the school, and it said Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And I'm like, whoa. Like I gotta go in there. So that's really what started. But I didn't like jiu-jitsu when I first started. I saw these guys rolling on the mats, and I'm like, this looks boring. Like it had, so I started doing Muay Thai, and at the time I was not working. I was working like a 9 to 5, but I had gotten laid off. And my schedule only allowed for me at the time just to do Muay Thai. And then when I finally got a job, the way that my schedule worked at my new 9 to 5, it didn't allow me to train Muay Thai anymore. So I said, well, I guess I'll try this jiu-jitsu thing, even though I think it looks boring. And to make a long story short, I ended up loving it. I ended up loving it so much that I completely abandoned the whole Muay Thai thing. And that's really how I started my journey in jiu-jitsu. I did have like aspirations to become like an MMA fighter. I had these like crazy ideas like, oh, I can, eventually get in the cage and all that. But I quickly learned that, like, look, what I'm able to do to people right on the mat and what they've been able to do to me is like, it's only a small sampling of what will happen to me if I really enter that cage. So,
oh yeah,
I completely abandoned that idea.
And getting punched in the face, it can't be fun.
I was at a school. The first school that I started at was called AMA Fight Club, and this is where like MMA fighters like Charlie Brenneman, Jim Miller trained at. And I was actually able to spar with some of these guys. And the way that they would tune me up, I'm like, Christ, like, and they're not even trying to like win anything here. This is just like practicing.
Oh my gosh.
I said, oof.
Yeah, this isn't for me, man.
Oh man, no, it's brutal. They would give you a beating, you know?
And if you go into a gym, you're new and you're doing jiu-jitsu, you will get a black belt that starts beating you up, and it's like fun. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not rough. It's like, oh, this is so much fun. Everything I do, everywhere I move, I lose. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But when you're getting hit, you don't get that same feeling. It doesn't feel great.
No, it feels helpless. But even like when you start off as a white belt, I'm sure you remember, you go with like even a higher ranked white belt, even a low level blue belt. I'm like, I'm helpless. Like I stand no chance against this guy. So, yeah, I forget what point I was trying to get to with that, but yeah, it's crazy. It's like, that's what really made me realize that, you know what, maybe MMA is not for me.
I completely understand. I realized it through watching my friends when we were training, because we were all doing jiu-jitsu and we all wanted to be, we were all going to be UFC champions in different weight classes, you know? And as like I watched some of them do the, you know, we had there was a lot of really good fighters. Actually, Charlie Brenneman trained at the Hit Squad when I was there for a period of time. But you know, all these good MMA fighters, and some of my friends would go in and I would watch them just get like kicked in the face and stuff. And I was like, man, that, you know, like I wonder if that's bad for you, you know. And that was really at the time that a lot of the CTE stuff was coming out. And then my dad had always trained with me, and he was really, I was very fortunate to have that voice in my ear saying like, hey, you know what you should protect is your brain, you know. And so that was really, for me, that was important to not, that I didn't try to go on to that MMA path and you know, damage the moneymaker, if you will.
Yeah, for me, the where I said that's it, I don't want to become an MMA fighter was, it's right around, I was like a blue belt and I was getting pretty good, or at least I thought. And after a pro class, this guy Brian McLaughlin, he's actually one of my clients now, and he used to be on the Ultimate Fighter years ago. He came in like after a pro training class, like you know, it's open mat in a jiu-jitsu class. They had like 2 mats. And he comes on over and he looks at me. He's like, hey, you want to roll or whatever? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to show this guy. And oh my God, was it like a humbling? I left that round. I mean, he was tapping me like every 30 seconds, like without an exaggeration, like in a 5-minute round. I'm like, this is brutal. Like, I definitely don't want to be fighting one of these guys. So.
And so, you know, you had kind of just brought up there that, you know, he's one of your clients. So if you could give I guess, a rundown, if people are not familiar with you, if they don't follow your YouTube or your Instagram and see some of your videos, kind of how would you explain what you do?
So what I do is really, I help clients, right, from a professional level. So what I do is 2 separate things. I have my personal brand, and then I have my client base. And my client base sort of mirrors what my personal brand is, and that's in helping them achieve their goals. And that's what my personal brand is about. It's about helping you take your life to the next level. How do you overcome adversity? How do you, you know, get over that hurdle in life that you might be going through? Because we're all going through something in life. And so that's sort of a rundown of like what my personal brand and client base is about. It's like, how do we help you achieve your goals, whether it's in business or it's in your personal life?
And so, what was kind of the start of your company / personal brand? What kind of brought that about?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what brought that about was just, I always enjoyed like whipping out, you know, I had like this little compact camera. I should have brought it here, but you know, I just liked filming my family, and I would make like these little videos or whatever. I never showed it to anybody, and it was just for fun. And I said, you know what, let me try and interview my jiu-jitsu coach. And so I filmed him, and it sort of went viral, not viral, but like it went like the word spread out about it within like locally here. Like all the students were like, man, that's really good. And I said, okay, well, let me try and do another coach and do another coach. And the videos were, you know, they were gaining like popularity around, you know, the people around in my circle. And then finally, the one that really went wild was the one I did on Brian McLaughlin. And a lot of views, or at least a lot of views for me at the time. I ended up getting like over 1,000 views. I don't know what it's at now. And at the end of every video or every interview I would do, I would ask you know, whoever I was interviewing, that coach, and I would say, hey, who would you like me to do next? Who would you be interested in hearing their story? And he was actually, hey, he actually said to me, he goes, hey, I'd like to, you know, have you interview my coaches. And I said, okay. I said, you know, who? I asked him, he goes, and I'll pay you. And I said, you want to pay me for this? Like when I first started, I didn't do this for any money. I just did it because I enjoyed hearing the stories about these coaches and what they went through in their lives and how they overcame adversity. And because it was actually like helping me in my own life. It was helping me realize like, hey, these guys are black belts. These guys have, achieved a lot, and they've achieved what I want to achieve. And they all have a common thing, right? They all have gone through something, and somehow they overcame it. And that's really what got me started with filmmaking for my personal brand. Again, I didn't start it because I had intentions of turning this into a business. But when Brian said, "Hey, I'd like to pay you to do my coaches," I said, "Shit, maybe I can turn this into something."
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the origins of it.
And that's a beautiful thing. Anytime you turn your art or your passion, anybody who is a jiu-jitsu coach understands this. Anytime you turn what you enjoy doing, and you probably have some knack for doing, it's this beauty when you turn that into a way to provide for yourself and your family. And so you look at jiu-jitsu. A lot of people think it's intentional, like, oh man, you wanted to be a jiu-jitsu coach. But the truth is, it's not always like that, because like I did jiu-jitsu because I was fat. I just didn't want to be fat, right? Yeah. Technically my mom just didn't want me to be fat. She made me go to jiu-jitsu. But I did jiu-jitsu, and then as I did it more, and I got around people that had turned it into a profession, and I started to find more passion. That's when you start to find, wait a second, this could be it for me. This could be the thing for me. And it sounds like for you, that's what took place. Is that is your production company / personal brand, is that your primary source of income?
So right now it is. I just took this to a full-time career at the end of June. So yeah, so it went from like, doing what I love to now, now I help local businesses and some big clients like create videos. So it's pretty awesome.
Congratulations, man. That's a really
Thanks.
cool. That was so I think maybe like a year and a half ago, maybe even longer, maybe 2 years ago now, was when I fully went to teaching jiu-jitsu. And that was, I remember waking up, because I used to be a personal trainer. I remember waking up on a day that I would go to do personal training, and like drinking a cup of coffee and just sitting. And it wasn't a holiday. It wasn't anything. It was just a day that I didn't have to get up at 4 a.m. and go do personal training. And it was this like, whoa. I mean, I haven't made it. I haven't made it to where I want to be, but like this goal, this feeling of this is now what I do, period. It's not, oh yeah, I teach jujitsu, but really I make no money from it, and I have to be a personal trainer full-time on the side. It's not like that anymore. It's like, I teach jujitsu. That is, and I'm sure that feeling happened for you. Am I correct when you got to that?
Yeah, man. Like I was working a 9 to 5, and like at night. So, before this, I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning. I was working on my client projects because I was getting, work before I quit my 9 to 5, or I stopped working my 9 to 5. And, like I'd wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I grind until, 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning doing my edits. And then I'd go to my 9 to 5, and then I'd come home, spend some time with my family, and then repeat that cycle. And on weekends I'd be filming, or I'd take days off. Like it was a grind, having to create these videos for my clients, and even just for my personal brand, to put these videos out that I've done for like, guys like Jocko or Joe Rogan, and, a few other people. Teddy Atlas is another one. It was a grind, man. And so when I didn't have to do that anymore and just be able to like get up like a normal human, it's nice. It's nice because I'm able to do what I love still, and I don't have to feel like I'm sacrificing my sleep, running on. Go ahead.
I was just gonna just to dig in more to that. Was there fear for you when you were making that final transition, when you were like going fully into into your production company, your personal brand, and nothing else? Was there fear in that at that point?
There still is. Yeah, man. Like, because you don't know. It's not like a paycheck where you're like, hey, you know what? I can get every Friday, I'm going to get paid, right? I can guarantee this money. Like there's times where things are like a desert. And there are other times where like, you're reaping the harvest. Like,
You're a
so
king. You're balling out.
yeah,
You
you're like,
know.
oh man, this is great. And then you get nothing for weeks. You're like, oh man, what am I going to do?
Uh
So yeah,
huh.
I still have that fear. I still have that fear that, hey, I might have to go back to my 9 to 5. What am I going to do if things really dry up? But, I think life has a way of making you stay in the path that I think it needs you to go in, right?
Hmm.
The reason I was able to, get to this point is because I just kept on pursuing what I love, and life kept on throwing me opportunities. I never in a million years thought that I'd be able to, like, when I first started in 2015 filmmaking and doing these videos on local coaches, I never thought that I'd be getting the attention of, let's call them major influencers, at least in our world, right? I think anybody in the jiu-jitsu community knows the name Joe Rogan, or a
Hmm.
good percentage of them
I would
knows.
say anybody in any community at this point knows the name Joe
Yeah,
Rogan.
yeah,
You
you're
know.
right. Yeah. I mean, he's getting the attention of guys like, Matthew McConaughey, and, big celebrities. Bernie Sanders is on there. That's pretty crazy.
It really
So,
is. It is really crazy to see that. So I want to actually go into that in a little bit. I have a few questions on that, and you had actually touched on it too. But while we're still here and we're still kind of digging into kind of turning your passion into a career, something we talk about on the show a lot because, like I said, we have jiu-jitsu coaches on all the time. We have people that have done this. We have YouTubers. We have people that have turned their passion into their full-time job, or their full-time, I wouldn't even say job, full-time source of income.
okay.
So I would ask you this: would you have any advice for someone, whether it was film, whether it was jujitsu, whether it was just something they find in art, they find a passion, and they think that one day it could be what provides for them? Would you have any advice for someone in that situation, like in the early stages?
Yeah, I would just say, keep on pursuing, what your passion is, and do it for, I learned really quickly, like, the reason I enjoyed creating these videos so much was because, yes, they were helping me in the storytelling, but it was also helping others around that I knew. And I started reaching people that I, literally across the globe, right? That I would have never met in a million years. So the reason I started was because, again, I started doing it because I wanted to help myself. I ended up helping other people, and that became my passion. So my point here is, if do it, the advice I would give to somebody would be, do it because it's going to help others, right? Yes, it's going to help you. It's going to take, you out of that 9 to 5 that you hate, going to every single day. But at the end of the day, it's like, how can my work help somebody else? Whether it's art, whether it's carpentry, like, how do you, motivate others with your work? And I think when you do that, your message, your work starts to spread like wildfire. I work with some clients where, like, they're all about them, and I constantly tell them, like, hey, once you start putting content out there, it doesn't matter if you're a contractor, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Once you start putting information out there or content out there that's going to help others, people are going to want to see your work. And that's how I feel like you can grow your brand.
Man,
So
that's super good. That is something that most people don't understand. That is that when you're trying to accomplish anything, the way that you treat people, the way that you can help people is really, really important for that next step. You know what I mean? You build, and this is actually kind of where I was going to transition to next is you had said, when you were starting, that you would ask that coach that you interviewed, who would you want to coach next, or who would I want, should I interview next?
right.
And what that would do, it's cool because you get the idea, but then it's also a really cool thing. I actually do this on the podcast after I get done on most of my shows. I say, hey, is there anybody who you think would be good on the podcast? Because it creates this avenue where I send a message to somebody and I say, hey, my buddy Sam said that you would be good on my podcast. And so it creates that connection to them. Like, oh, I like Sam,
Yeah.
so, if Sam trusts this guy, I can be on his podcast. And so you did that with your production company. And so that's kind of where I wanted to start to just push towards is, you have some really cool, as we would call them, gets, like you've gotten some really cool names that you've gotten to work with. And so I just wanted to kind of dig into that. So like, let's take, for instance, let's just start with like Teddy Atlas. How did that come about? How were you able to, create content with Teddy Atlas?
So he's actually become a really good friend of mine now. And so the way that relationship started was he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about. So for those that don't know who he is, he used to be a ESPN commentator. He was most famously known for being Mike Tyson's coach, boxing coach. And he was talking about Mike Tyson, how he feels that he's really 0-5 in his career. But the way that he was talking about Mike Tyson's life and how you're not tested in life until you are truly tested, really spoke to me. I'm like, man, that's a powerful way of, like, he has a way of using his words that that many don't have the ability to do. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take what he just said in that podcast, and I'm going to turn that into a video. And man, did it spread. Like, I try to take a lot of what he was saying when he was mentioning Mike specifically, because it wasn't about Mike Tyson. It was about the message that he was trying to say, which was, again, you're not tested in life until you are truly tested. It doesn't matter if if it's your girlfriend, your friend, if you're a doctor, if you're an attorney, you're not tested until you go through some sort of struggle. And that really spoke to me. And again, so going back, I turned that into a video, and it went pretty viral. I ended up getting, like, at the time, I think it got up to like 30 or 40,000 views. And his team ended up reaching out to me and said, hey, like, do you mind if we share that video? And I said, yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So they shared the video, and they said, hey, would you be interested in doing something like another one like that for our podcast? So I did another one for them. And then, shortly after, they invited me to the podcast studio. And I went up to the studio in New York City, met Teddy, met Ken, and met Rob. He's his PR guy. And that's how the relationship started with those guys. Like, it literally just started from me saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to do this video because I think it'll help me and it'll help a lot of people. And it went from that to now I'm exclusively his videographer. And I anything that you've recently seen for him on his YouTube channel was me filming it.
And that is super, super, there's just a lot to dig into that story. Back to what we were just saying a second ago. You did not send Teddy Atlas a cold message on Instagram saying, hey, I'm a videographer. Can I shoot you? No, you didn't. You went out and you provided, your goal was to provide value for other people, but you also provided a lot of value to someone like him who is still in a brand building. That's what he's doing. He's building that Teddy Atlas brand, and you provide this kind of unique thing, this thing for free. You just provided it, and that brought them to reach out to you instead of being the other way around. And so that's a really, really interesting that happened that way.
Well, let's be honest here. Like, I create those videos, yes, to at the end of the day, it's sort of like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because I do realize that the power that those videos have, right? Because a lot of those videos that I create for free are my marketing tools.
Of course.
Right? They are how I get the attention of people like Teddy Atlas. Now, I create them because when I hear their message, it's like, one of my rules is that I have to, if I'm going to create a video, it has to touch me in some way. It's got to give me some sort of feeling. Otherwise, I don't bother with it. And but at the same time, I know that, hey, you know what? A lot of people can potentially see this, and I use that as a marketing tool to put my work out there. Would Teddy have otherwise seen my work if I didn't create that? Probably not. If I would have direct messaged him and said, hey, I'm a videographer right around the corner from you, Would he have, would he have, said, yes, let's do something? Probably not. But when I create something like that he was also equally passionate about, and he sees that, he's like, well, okay, we've got to talk to this guy. Right. So
and,
it works out for both of us sometimes.
and that is of course that is every business should be beneficial for both parties, right? That is my I teach jujitsu, but not for free. But I teach jujitsu knowing that what I am giving, what I'm providing, is worth every penny, and more than that,
Yeah.
and I, and you look at that because people think that it has to be, oh, if you're providing something for free, I'm providing this podcast for free, that means that, I am feeding the hungry or something like that. It is not. Obviously, my intentions with this podcast, and this, if this offends you guys while listening, cover your ears, is to eventually make money from my podcast, is to eventually build my brand, and eventually do that. But right now, all I can do on my podcast is help the people that listen, right? And so that's why I bring on people like you, people that have done really interesting things, and maybe it can be beneficial for these people. And so that is, when you're doing that, when you're providing this free stuff, of course you have some goal, like, man, it would be awesome if Teddy Atlas messaged me. But usually those things, like, you think that and you're like, but it wouldn't happen. I mean, there's no way it would happen.
Yeah,
And
if you go in with like expectations, like I try and do every video with zero expectations. Like my most recent video like that I did was on Charlie Chaplin. Well, I know that Charlie Chaplin's never going to contact me, right?
yeah,
Yeah, he's long gone. So
that would be crazy if he did. If he contacts you, I need you on the podcast again immediately. We got to talk about that.
Well, Charlie Chaplin's long gone, dude. Do you know who he is or no?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, he'd have to contact me from another realm. So if I'm hearing Charlie Chaplin talk to me, all right, there's like,
that's what I mean. If you get Charlie Chaplin, you're jumping on the podcast.
Yeah, man. So that video, specifically, again, it was one of those where it spoke to me, and I obviously had zero intentions of him ever seeing it because he's no longer with us.
Yeah.
But, going back to what you were saying about, there's got to be an even exchange of value. Yes. Like your students are paying you, or even this podcast, like nobody's, you're not monetizing it yet. But in order to take it to the next level, it's got to get monetized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you could start it off by producing it out of your own pocket, right? Like I see a microphone there, and these things aren't cheap, right? Like when I create a video, it costs me money, right? I'm investing my, and I don't ask my audience for anything. I have a little link at the bottom on some of my videos, but I don't promote it. So if you want to send me cash, great, but it's not what I'm here for. So up until, really my client base is what really allows me to continue creating these personal branded videos. Like the money that I get from them, a percentage of that goes back into the personal brand, so I can continue to provide value. I haven't been able to find a way to really monetize those videos. So I just look at them as like, hey, you know what? People see them, and I use them as a marketing tool to get the attention of other clients. So,
but monetization is in itself, or marketing in itself is monetization, and so that's like, when you market, you are turning that into your business,
Yeah.
And so on that same note, we talked about like Teddy Atlas. So how do you get in contact with the Joe Rogans or the Jockos of the world? How did those come about?
Really the same way, just creating content that, you can tell when somebody's talking about something on a podcast that it's really hitting home. Like they're speaking from their heart. And, for whatever reason, I just have a good ear for listening to that kind of stuff, or hearing out for that kind of stuff. So, so that's what I do. To answer your question, how do I get their attention? It's by creating content that I think that matters to them. Does it matter to them? Does it matter to their audience? The first video that went viral with like a guy like Jocko or Joe Rogan was a video I did for Jocko called Pawn, and he was talking about how the industrial complex, the military industrial complex, I think it was, and how good America is and corporations, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a lot of our viewpoints have probably changed on that in globally, but I think, you know, this is before he was even he even had his own podcast. Somebody was doing a Q&A on Tim Ferriss's podcast. Or I'm sorry, Jocko was doing a Q&A on Tim Ferriss's podcast, and the guy asked him, "Do you feel like you were a pawn in the military?" And, you know, I think at the beginning he goes, "Ugh," like sort of like that, and he just answers the question. Obviously, the guy was asking the question to almost like provoke him, I think.
Yeah.
And the way that he answered it, I'm like, man, like I never looked at it that way. And I said, I'm going to turn this to a video, and he ended up sharing it, and I'm like, holy shit! Like, I couldn't believe that was the first like big guy or big like influencer, I'm gonna call him, that shared one of my pieces of work, and the thing ended up getting like over 100,000 views like quickly. And I'm like, oh shit! Like maybe I'm really onto something, because that was actually the first video that I created that was even like that. Everything else prior was all original pieces of content where I would interview a coach and I would create my own original piece on that individual. So that was the first video that I did that was like that. So that's how I got their attention. I'm like, man, if I got his attention on that, what happens if I do another one on him and another one on somebody else? And that's sort of how I started, you know, building my brand.
That's really cool. And just something else you just said was that, you know, you will listen to these podcasts looking for something, you know, I forget how you said it, that like something that they're passionate about, right?
Yeah, that touches their heart. Yeah.
And that's exactly, that touches their heart. And that is one of the most important things. I mean, imagine how ridiculous it would be if I had you come on this podcast and we talked about something that didn't interest you, you know, and even if something that you were maybe even pretty sharp on, and but it wasn't what mattered to you. And that is, you know, that is just in podcasting and in life. When I am having a new student come in, if, you know, if my new student is in a band, we're going to probably talk about music. I can assume that they are going to be passionate about that. Even if I don't know much, I'm just going to ask questions about, you know, well, tell me about this. Tell me about, I don't know anything about that. That's super interesting. Right. And you find what matters to people. It's so easy to only want to talk about what matters to you, right? It's so easy to be like, oh yeah, I want to talk about, you know, I love jiu-jitsu, so I'm only going to talk about jiu-jitsu to people. You know, this is a jiu-jitsu podcast. We've talked about 2 minutes of jiu-jitsu, right? But we've talked about, you know, and we can obviously relate all of this stuff to jiu-jitsu. It's all in the martial arts realm. It's all in the martial arts world. But imagine if like the whole time I was just like asking you questions about half guard, and you're like, Josh, I don't play half guard. I can't stress this to you enough. I don't play, you know. And so you find like, what is somebody's passion, and something that, you know, you have built your entire brand on, all of your, you know, your everything on, would be the word, overcome. Okay. So that would be like, that is what, when you look up any of your stuff, that is what you're going to see. Like, that is our goal, is we're here to, you know, to overcome and help other people overcome. So just digging into that, what does the word overcome mean to you?
I think it means everything. I think we're all constantly fighting something in life. You know, just looking back at my own personal struggles, like, you know, you're always going through something in life, but knowing that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And if you constantly focus on, hey, you know what, there's always I'm going to get over this at some point, right? You're never going to, unless you choose to stay at the, you know, at the bottom of the hill. If you keep on putting one foot in front of the other, you're going to overcome whatever it is that you're going through. Now, there's certain things that are completely out of your control, and I understand that, like, you know, like sickness, right? Like, you know, cancer is, you know, unfortunately out of your control in many times. But if you keep on trying to put one foot in front of the other, whether it's in jujitsu or anything in life, you're gonna get through it. And for me, just knowing, keeping that in the back of my mind, regardless of what I'm going through in life, you know, is what helps me wake up in the morning, what helps me keep on putting that foot in front of another.
That is super important to note. Is you can't always control your circumstances, but you can always control your attitude towards them. And having that mindset is obviously, we can look at it on a deeper meaning, but probably on a shallower meaning is when you're a white belt and you keep getting tapped out. If you just keep showing up, you just keep showing up, you keep getting that mat time. Eventually, there's going to be a new white belt that comes in, and you're 6 months in, and you're rolling with them, and you're like, "Whoa, did I suck this bad? Was it like this for me when I was training like this?" And you start to see, but the only way that happens is if you stick to it. If you put one foot in front of the other, whether in jiu-jitsu or in life.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. That, look, in my life, right? I don't know how much you know about, like, before I even started jujitsu, before I started filmmaking. Like, I was in a marriage, a really really bad marriage, in fact, and I walked. I had, we ended up getting divorced. I ended up having to move back into my parents' house. I was drowning in debt, right? I couldn't control any of those circumstances. I couldn't control the divorce. I couldn't control my debt because it was just so high. All I could do was control one thing in life at the time. And so let me just also add that I was, 280 pounds. Now I'm walking around, 170. So the only thing that I was able to control out of that chaotic time in my life was me, right? I said, you know what? I'm going to try and do what I can to at least get my body to a different physical state. And that's why, for me, like, overcoming things is just so important, because, like, hey, I know that I couldn't control anything else, but if I can control myself, and I can control what I put in my body, I can control what I do every day. Nobody else can control that. And I, looking back and having gone through all of that, like, that's why for me overcoming is so important, because, like, hey, those were learning lessons of, like, hey, I can get through things. If I can lose 100 pounds, what if I applied that same work ethic to other things in life? So
That is a beautiful thing. That's something I always talk about on the podcast, and I talk about to my students in the mindset of jiu-jitsu, but then relate it to life. And I'm going backwards, right? We're taking it from life to jiu-jitsu. But when you're in bottom side control,
yeah,
sometimes you are in bottom side control. Both of your arms are controlled, and your chest is being smashed, and all you can control is your hip movement. And so then you start to move your hips, and you start to move your hips, and you start to move your hips, and you try to get that knee back in front. Sometimes you can't even move your hips. All you can control is your breathing. That's all you get to control, but you do have control of it. And so you say, you know what? I'm going to breathe. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to take this for right now. And when there's space, I'm going to be ready to react, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm not going to, I'm going to control the thing that I can control. And that's a huge thing for when people are dealing with something as stressful as a divorce, and stressful as all those, you're overweight, you're divorced, you're having to move back in with your parents. And you said, hey, you know what? I can't move out from my parents' house right now. I have too much debt. I can't do anything about my failed marriage. It's just, I can't, but I can control my weight. I can focus on what I can control. And so often it's so easy to say, I have 10 things bad happening. I'm just going to try to work on all 10 of them. And then nothing, then you end up with 12 things, you know? And so that's a really important thing to dig into. I think that's a really important thing to understand for people is to sometimes just focus on what you can control. And on that note, how did you lose the weight?
So I started, this is way before I even started doing jiu-jitsu. Actually, when I got into jiu-jitsu, I was already already in pretty good shape. So to answer your question, I started just with like doing, bodybuilding type of workouts, eating 5 meals a day, doing my cardio, doing weight training, and just applying that discipline to my everyday existence. That's real just simple. That's simple
That's
answer.
good.
Yeah.
That is good. Have you ever gotten your weight back up, or have you been able to keep your weight off?
No, I've never blown back up to 280, but there's right now I'm on another like 12-week shred again. So right now I'm down to 170. So sometimes I'll fluctuate back up to like 180, 190, and I'm like, okay, I got to start pulling back, pulling back and doing something about this. So, but no, I've never like ballooned back up to a 44-inch waist like that. That never happened.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny. This is the contrast of guests that I have. So the last guest that I have is actually one of my brown belts. He is a really, really good ultra heavyweight competitor. And we were talking, and he was talking about when he had wrestled his whole life. When he left high school, or when he left college, he had been cutting weight all the time his whole life. He went from 170 to 270 in a year.
Whoa.
And yeah, and he has kept that 270 pretty much the whole time. So the contrast in guests that I had was just a funny note.
Cross paths almost.
Yeah. That was an interesting one. And he feels every bit of like 400 when you roll with him too. So, it makes it even worse.
Yeah. One of the guys I train with, he's a big boy like that. But he moves like a 170. So now you've got this weight and you've got this guy that can move fast. And it's like, when you combine the two, man, it's a freaking nightmare.
And it's not fair. You shouldn't be allowed to.
I mean, you're 100 pounds more than me. It's like, I stand no chance. You're a black belt. I'm a brown belt. Like, but you're just athletically better than me, even though you're overweight. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's very discouraging when somebody is bigger, faster, stronger, and has better technique than you. Yeah, there's just there's nothing, there's nothing you can do. You just sit there.
With Godzilla, dude. It's like, you got no chance. Like, what am I gonna grab?
That is a very true part of jiu-jitsu. Is sometimes you can always look at like, oh, I made a mistake here, I made a mistake there. But sometimes you're just going to lose. There's just nothing. There's no way around it. This guy's just better than you. He checks every box that you don't. And but it's a beautiful thing. It's a part of jiu-jitsu. It's part of getting beat up, and sometimes you just don't stand a chance.
Well, what happens if that happened on the street, right? Like, you don't get to pick your opponents, right? So it's good that we were able to train with guys that are, all over the spectrum when it comes to their skill level, their weight, their strength, like, because it's going to give you all different types of flavors of like what you could possibly run into on the street if, God forbid, you ever needed to defend yourself. So yes, it's unfair maybe from a competition level, but I think it's very fair for teaching you lessons in life.
I think I totally agree. I always love it when I will have like 135-pound guy tell me like, hey, I'm going to compete. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then like 2 weeks later, they're like, hey, are there weight classes at jiu-jitsu tournaments? And I'm like, you were going in to compete thinking you were going to fight like 250-pound guys? Like, yeah, I do it in the gym all the time. I just wasn't sure. I didn't know that if it was like that. I thought you just fought everybody. Like, no, man. You stay at 135.
Yeah. I guess, they do have that, right? With the absolute.
Yeah.
Right. But like, yeah, when you're first starting, you definitely don't want your first jiu-jitsu match to be against this big dude, no way. I always
like will advise my students to not cut weight for their first couple tournaments. Like, dude, just don't even worry about it. Just show up and compete, right? Yeah. But I still do ask questions like, hey, what do you weigh? What are the weight classes? Stuff like that. Well, that like sometimes your the things you preach, they just kind of carry over throughout your gym. And so what happened was I have this new guy, he's going to compete. And he asked one of the guys, hey, which weight class should I do? And the guy told him, oh, Josh always says, just compete at what you weigh. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, I would have asked him a question of, what do you weigh? What are the weight classes? He weighs 222 and he fought at 220 and up. And so the two guys that he fought both had 70 plus pounds on him, and he would have just had to lose 2 pounds to make the weight class below. And so he actually did really well. He actually won. He actually beat one of the monsters that he fought. But it was a really funny thing of like, hey, next time you tell somebody, oh yeah, don't cut any weight, make sure you ask them like, hey, do you have 1 pound to lose that will keep you from fighting guys that weigh 70 pounds more than you? Because if so, maybe lose that 1 pound.
Yeah, but the opposite holds true too, because like if I roll a guy so I used to compete around 180 to 189, and when I would cut down to the 170s, I found that I was having a harder time with those guys than I was within within the 180 to 189, because those 170 guys are faster, they're much more technical, whereas the guys that were in the 180 to 189, not that they weren't fast and not that they weren't technical, but I felt like it was more of an even playing field. So here I thought, I'm gonna beat these other guys up because I'm at the high end of their weight bracket. No, man, they were faster than me. I couldn't keep up. And then there's one guy in my jiu-jitsu school where like, I'm probably 15, 20 pounds over him, but he gives me the hardest time. I can't, so on paper, you're like, oh, Sam's 170, this guy's 145, like Sam's gonna tune him up. No, he tunes me up. It's the other way around. And he's a lower belt. So
and you'll even feel guys that are smaller by 20 or 30 pounds that feel as strong or stronger just because usually it's because of body type. Usually you get a guy that's shorter and their weight is distributed differently. And you start to fight this guy, you start to go with him. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy's so strong. How come I have 20 pounds on him and he's ridiculously strong, but his body mechanics are just different. And so that's like, for me, I could compete. I always compete at medium heavy, which is 194. I could, if I focused on it, go back down to middleweight, but at black belt adult, middleweight probably has 12 guys in it at the bigger tournaments that are good enough to win the worlds. Medium heavy, there's probably 3 guys in it that are good enough to win the worlds. And so it's like, man, it doesn't make sense to diet really hard, to lose weight, to starve myself, and then go fight probably tougher guys, or at least in a more stacked division. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so, yeah, it's like, I know, who was it? Lucas Leite used to always compete at heavyweight. And I never thought anything of it. I always thought that, this guy's a heavyweight. And I watched him at Worlds in 2017, and I was standing by him, and I was competing at middle. And I was like, I think I'm bigger than this guy. And heavyweight's 207. And so I asked my buddy that trained with him, and he's like, oh yeah, he weighs like 175, 180, but he competes at 207 because he plays all deep half, and he thinks that the guys are slower and it's easier and they want to smash more. And so he's like, he gets to play more of his game at this, in this division. And so it's kind of a unique thing that you can use, being smaller as a strategy against somebody on top of being bigger.
Yeah, I'm a very big like bottom half guard guy. And it's unbelievable. Like if you get your one hook in, like a butterfly hook, and you're able to like lift a guy that's 100 pounds over, like they're a feather. And at the end of rolls, a lot of times, like when I'm rolling with a bigger guy for the first time, they're like, dude, you're so strong. I'm like, it's all leverage. It's not even that I'm strong. I mean, yeah, I'm strong, but it's not that I'm using all strength. Like I'm able to lift you up with no issue. So, and I actually do better with guys like that are much more heavier than me sometimes, because like you said, they just don't move as fast.
That is like, you're going to probably play to your game. So, or to your size. So, you see a lot of, most heavyweights, you don't see them standing open guard Toriando passing. You see them on top trying to smash and create that pressure. And if you're playing with somebody who's good at half, that pressure is what they need to sweep you and what they need to get underneath you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's something that's always, it's fun. Like having that, you have to have different games for different people. You have guys that are in the 300s and you roll with them. You have to roll with them. At least for me, I have to roll with them completely differently than I roll with a guy that's my weight, And so, and it's fun to have to use jiu-jitsu for your opponent sometimes, instead of just like, I'm just gonna, I really like triangles. If I try a triangle on a guy that's 280, it ain't happening.
No.
We're playing omoplata on that guy, and so that's one of the fun things about jiu-jitsu. But we're getting to the end of the show. I always finish the show with the exact same question. Okay, so we always finish the same question. The show's name is the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show. So the idea is this: I am at maybe I am just at your gym. I'm just visiting. I'm a newer white belt, okay? And you and I partner together. I'm asking you questions. We're talking to stuff, and I'm like, wait a second, Jocko, Joe Rogan, that's so cool. And then I say, Sam, I feel like I suck at jiu-jitsu. How do I suck less at jiu-jitsu? What would be your answer to that?
I would say whether this is in life or in jiu-jitsu, I think that what happens in your life is for you, right? It doesn't happen to you. So sometimes, like in jiu-jitsu, things present themselves, problems present themselves because they want you to work on whatever that weakness is. So if it's in jiu-jitsu, sometimes I'm constantly getting armbarred. Why is this happening to me? No, you have to ask yourself, what are you doing that's wrong that I keep on getting caught in this armbar, right? And that's in life as well. Like, are you constantly getting into arguments with people? Are you constantly getting into road rage situations? Are you constantly getting yourself into debt or getting yourself overweight? It's like life is trying to tell you, like, hey, whatever it is that you're doing is wrong. And you need to fix it. It's not that life is throwing you, is trying to put you down. It's that like you're doing something that you can change today. So by putting one foot in front of the other, you can do that.
Man, that was an excellent answer. I know you're a brown belt, Sam, but that was a black belt answer right there. I'm going to send an email to your coach right now and tell him, let him know, hey, he dropped the black belt answer on me. That was excellent.
Thanks, man.
That was excellent. And thank you for being on the show. Is there anything you want to say to finish, or just give some information for people to be able to check you out, check out your work?
Yeah, just check me out on Instagram. It's at Samuel Rivera Films. That's my handle pretty much everywhere: YouTube, Instagram. If you want to ever send me a DM, I pretty much answer everybody that contacts me. So reach out, let's become friends, and let's overcome things.
That's awesome, man. Thank you again for being on the show.
All right, thank you for having me.
And that is the episode. I hope you guys loved it. I really enjoyed recording it. It's always fun when I get to do an episode with someone I've never talked to before. And it was interesting because there's not a lot about him as a person. There's a ton about his production that he does. There's a ton on his YouTube channel, but there's very little about him out anywhere. And so for me, doing research to be able to ask questions was very hard. I really had to kind of hope that I could guess what this guy would be like to formulate some of the questions that I was going to ask. And hopefully I did a good job on that. Hopefully I was able to dig into what would interest you, dig into the questions that you guys might like to know. And thanks again, Sam, for being on the episode. I really think that this episode will age well. I think this episode will be like a 2 or 3 years from now thing where he's doing more huge things. He's doing bigger things than he is now. And I am like, yeah, I think I was on my podcast, because that's what do I always say on the show? It's not about what you can do. It's about who you know. That's all that matters. That's how I live my life is, just surround yourself with really cool people. And then occasionally they'll ask you to hang out with them while they're doing cool things. That is the game plan. That's all we worry about on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, is trying to just ride the coattails of people that are cooler than us. And that's all I have for you guys today. As always, if you guys enjoyed this episode, if you're watching on YouTube, give it a thumbs up and a subscribe. If you are listening anywhere, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you can be aware every time we post new episodes. And without further ado, I hope you guys have a great week. I hope that you guys got something out of this episode, and I hope that you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu.